What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Now that Confess Fletch recently hit Showtime and I've reviewed all three movies, it's time to rank all three Fletch films from worst to best. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your ranking of the Fletch movies are. As always, this is just my list and not a definitive ranking. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these videos, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie-related content on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time, and let's jump into the list. In last place is Fletch Lives, and this one, I was going back and forth on it for a bit. Now, there's definitely no question that compared to the other two movies on this list that it's not in the same league as them. Whatever else you think of this movie, I think we can mostly agree on that. But this was such a mixed bag for me that I wasn't even immediately sure whether I thought there was more that I liked or disliked about it. But after it sat with me for a bit, I came to the conclusion that I think there's more that I liked than disliked, but it's still only just by so much. And I think the big thing this has working against it is that it's the only film in this franchise not already based on a novel. The other two are book adaptations and already have what I assume are well thought out stories to go off of. I haven't read any of them, but I have heard they're good. But this is a completely original story, and you can tell this didn't have such a strong foundation to go off of, because what we get here is the elements of a working Fletch film, but it's not the most cohesive Fletch film. Now, there are things about it that do work. It can be funny. It does try to have this layered, intricate story. You have a great cast. In the supporting roles, Cleveland Little is the big standout, but you also have Hal Holbrook and Arlie Ermey, and Fletch himself isn't totally unlikable. But at the same time, while this character is typically known to be a little arrogant and full of himself, here there are sometimes instances where Chevy Chase is talking down to someone and it's meant to be funny and charming, even though he's arrogant, but instead the joke would just fall flat and he only comes off as smug. Now, I didn't find this to be to the point where it was constantly aggravating, like I didn't flat out hate the character this time around, but when his jokes wouldn't work, it just had no charm to it and it just came off as condescending. And with that, the mystery can sometimes get so convoluted that it's to the point it'll hit us with so much exposition and bounces around through so many characters that it sometimes forget to have any sort of intrigue to it. There are times, yes, it works, but there are stretches where I didn't always felt like I cared, mainly in the middle of the movie. And also with that, I do feel a number of jokes don't particularly age the best given the setting. There were jokes in the first movie that don't age the greatest either, but I felt it was much more apparent with this movie that some things just came off as a little cringy, to say the least. So I was going back and forth on this a lot, but I think despite all my criticisms of it, when it works, it does have some of that same magic as the first movie. The cast all do really well, and I think they hold this movie together. It's just that it can be very consistent overall, and it's easily the weakest of these three movies. Our runner-up is Confess Fletch, and honestly, if you asked me on a different day, I could very well put this in first place too. I was torn between my number 2 and my number 1, but I thought this was a great time, and I don't understand why this got buried the way it did. Despite the fact you have Don Draper himself, John Hamm, taking over as Fletch, and it's from Greg Mottola, who also gave us Superbad. I know comedies aren't always surefire hits at the box office these days, but this got like no marketing, and it got one of the quietest VOD releases I can recall before it hit Showtime. So that was a little disappointing, but I enjoyed this one. While I think John Hamm is great as a dramatic actor, I do think he's a bit undervalued as a comedic talent, and this is a great showcase for his talent. If there's someone who can nail that arrogant but funny personality with that dry, deadpan sense of humor that Chevy Chase is most well known for, it's him. Like, I feel if you were to immediately watch this after having just seen either of the two 80s movies, it would feel very seamless. And in terms of that sense of humor, I do think it works much better when it's going for snappier, wittier humor than when it goes for something too silly. Some goofy stuff does work here, that's the same with the first movie, but I felt some of the moments where it tried a bit too hard for something goofy, it just wasn't working for me. Like, there's a character played by Marcia Gay Harden who repeatedly chases after Fletch, and she's supposed to be very exaggerated, and I just found that to not really work all that well. But some of the wittier exchanges and the moments of Fletch changing his identities, all the usual staples of the other movies, I thought a lot of that worked much better than the goofier stuff. And then even from a story angle, now that we're back to a story based on one of the Fletch books, we're back to being more immersed in a noir-centric atmosphere, with an intriguing mystery being weaved in with all the humor. I found there to be a nice style to it, it made for a good time, and I'm just disappointed that it went so far under the radar. I do hope we get to see more of these movies with John Hamm in them because he was great. But in first place is the original Fletch, and if you're looking for a movie that just feels like the perfect encapsulation of Chevy Chase's comedic style and personality, I think this nails it. It's definitely a reflection of his actual personality, if you know even the slightest bit about him in real life. But that aside, when he's allowed to go off and make all these snappy one-liners in this sort of cocky way that's not too grating, that's one of his strongest suits, and this sees him essentially get to fully lean into that personality while navigating his way through this dense mystery that acts as a nice throwback to those hard-boiled detective dramas, but with a much more comedic spin, of course. Again, this one gets down the atmosphere right so that you're still intrigued by the actual story just as much as you are all the comedic bits. Now, sometimes, and yes, this is essentially the same problem that rings through all three of these movies, there can be moments where maybe it's a bit too dry, maybe not every single moment is laugh out loud hilarious, and maybe not every turn in the story is this fun, riveting moment, but this is probably the movie where it's the most consistent and suffers from those problems the absolute least. And it blends the noir and comedic elements a lot more seamlessly for the most part. Plus, it also has a great cast, similar to its sequel. Joe Don Baker has a fun screen presence and is a big standout as this corrupt police chief, but even down to the bit parts, you even have George Wendt in his small but fun role as one of Fletch's contacts, and you also have Gina Davis in one of her first roles. She's not in it a ton, but she does get in a good couple of moments, so that was cool. So, similar to Fletch Lives, there are a few jokes that don't age the best, but it's also not anywhere close to the degree it was in that film, so I was not even close to feeling so on the fence with this as I was with Fletch Lives. Overall, this is a fun time, it's a great noir comedy, it's one of Chevy Chase's better movies in general, and it comes in as my number one of the Fletch movies. But let me know, what's your ranking of the three Fletch movies? Did you agree with this list at all? Did you disagree with it? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone and keep having fun with film.